One of the things that's becoming more and more clear as we learn about Michael Cohen's sentencing memo from Robert Mueller, and as we see Donald Trump's erratic reactions, and we see conservative pundits like Jennifer Rubin say they predict that Donald Trump's going to resign and try to get a pardon from Mike Pence. In the midst of all this, this is a sort of constant that we see, which is that Donald Trump Jr. appears to be in really big trouble. Why do I say that? Well, because every new piece of evidence, every new piece of testimony, every new document that we see related to the Trump-Russia indictments look like they're saying that Don Jr. lied and therefore should be expecting an indictment. And specifically, it seems that Donald Trump Jr. lied to Congress about the Trump family's business in Russia. This is not like some esoteric idea. There are members of Congress who are plainly saying Donald Trump Jr. lied to us. Here's just one example. This is Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speer. Check it out.
Do you think Donald Trump Jr. lied to your committee?
I believe he did.
About?
I don't really want to go into it at this point, but I think there's at least two occasions when he lied to the committee.
So in addition to these lies, there's more and more legal scrutiny over Donald Trump Jr.'s involvement in that Trump Tower meeting that we've talked about so much, which once again seems to have been much more significant than initially reported. Remember that Trump Jr. first said there was no meeting. Then he said, okay, there was a meeting, but it was about adoptions of Russian children. Then his emails were released, which confirmed that he had foreknowledge that the meeting was taking place with Russians, and it was specifically about dirt on Hillary Clinton. Don Jr. seems to know that he's in trouble. I think it was last week or the week before that I reported to you that he's been telling friends that he thinks Mueller is going to indict him. And the latest news is that Donald Trump Jr. is hiding out in Canada to avoid the media if and when this possible indictment happens, which apparently could be very, very soon. This is sort of like the last bit of this story. And the prediction is that the bomb is close to dropping and Don Jr. wants to be out of the U.S. when it happens. Gabriel Sherman, who has done some really good reporting on this, wrote in Vanity Fair that the Trump family overall is expecting things to implode this week or next week, and that Don Jr. specifically is saying, I'm out of here for now. We've been talking about this for a while, Pat, and I think in one of our polls, wasn't Don Jr. the winner of the most likely insider to next be indicted?
Yeah, so there was Don Jr., there was Roger Stone, there was maybe Jared Kushner, but Don Jr. certainly won out. And I would have to agree with that assessment.
Listen, maybe Don Jr. could seek asylum in Canada, claiming he's the victim of political prosecution, of course, by his dad's own Justice Department or something. Obviously, I'm kidding. Canada wouldn't accept that as an asylum claim. By the way, there's also an extradition treaty between the United States and Canada, so just hiding out in Canada also wouldn't work. The most interesting thing for me about a Don Jr. indictment is how it's going to set Trump off. I can only imagine, Pat, that Trump will lose his mind if Don Jr. is indicted, and it's going to be a new unraveling of tweets and obstruction, the likes of which up until now we've likely only dreamed of.
If this happens, I think certainly things are going to accelerate. Either Trump is going to think about or maybe act on firing Robert Mueller, or we'd at least know that Mueller is close to wrapping things up and coming out with his final report. Because if you're going to start indicting members of the president's family, I think you're pretty close to coming out with your final assessment.
Something to look forward to. I just hope that they include this in the finale of season 2 and don't wait until season 3 to get to this stuff, because I don't want to be kept hanging in that way over the new year.